Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited that you've joined us. We have a really fascinating topic and discussion we're going to have today. It's all about DevOps, mainframes, and the economic rebound. Of course, we all want that to happen. What's that going to look like? Today's webinar is sponsored by ASG Technologies. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'll serve also as host, but also as one of the folks that will contribute as a speaker today. So I do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar. All attendees will receive an email with a link to the recording and the slides that we used today. We're also giving away two $50 gift cards, so stick around to the end and find out if you're a winner. Last but not least, I want to make sure that you know we love questions. This is the dialogue. We all see lots of webinars, and we want this to be as engaging for not just us, but for you as well. So please enter any and all your questions in the questions tab on the GoToWebinar software, and we'll weave those into our conversation as the hour proceeds. Okay, so let's move on to our topic, DevOps, mainframes, and the economic rebound. It's my pleasure to introduce my two, co-host guests, co-speakers. First is Anna Murray. She is Senior Product Manager with ASG Technologies. Then also Jeff Charrington, who is VP of Product Marketing with ASG Technologies also. So we're looking forward to having a great conversation with all three of us. So I'm going to kick things off. Actually, first, Anna, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do at ASG Technologies.
Sure. I'm currently responsible for the mainframe productivity solutions, including our JCL Management solutions. And throughout my career, I have worked with development teams, sales and marketing, and executives to ensure the success of enterprise software products. And I'm really happy to be here today. So,
welcome. Good to be with you. Jeff?
Thanks, Mitch. Jeff Charrington with ASG. I've worked with enterprises around the world on both the buying side and the selling side, always focusing on working toward getting more value from the investments that the enterprise makes. And in fact, I hope that's what you'll hear we're offering in this discussion today. Mitch, back to you.
Very good. Great. Well, let's kind of get into the topic. Also want to note for our participants, the right-hand side of the screen, GoToWebinar, and my Mac decided to have a disagreement about how we're showing the screen today. So apologies for the little technical difficulty, but in these times of work at home and COVID, I think we all have got a little more flexibility with those kind of things happening. So just to set the stage for our conversation, one of the things that I get to do as an analyst in the industry is really look at trends and what's happening, and that's kind of difficult to do in today's environment where things are changing so quickly. I mean, if we of course have the health part of the impact from COVID-19 and what that means for not just us as a society and our states and our local economies, but to us personally, right? I mean, it affects all of us. You may have had COVID, a family member may have had, you may have a death in the family, and we recognize that, of course, that's an extreme part of the tragedy that we're all experiencing, as well as the economic output or economic impact, as well as impact to how we're working. So with all due respect to the personal impact to all of us, some really kind of tremendous things are happening. And I take the attitude of, even in times of great challenge, there's often great opportunity. And that's the theme of hope through all of this as well. We're bombarded with all kinds of news and information about how many cases there have been. This number's out of date, it's in the 90s, and I think I just updated it late last week. And unemployment numbers, we just heard new numbers today, pushing it up to 39 million. Gosh, what a tremendously large number, something we've never seen before. So we've all entered some really, not just unfamiliar, but drastically different times than what we've experienced before. And we don't know, are things going to rebound quickly or are things going to take some time to resolve? It's probably the latter, but even with that, what does it look like? One of my pleasurable parts of my job is to really look at how in technology is not only impacting, but enabling what we do in our businesses, in the products and services that we provide. And I think all of us have experienced, of course, the swing over to Zoom and Team and all of the online meeting applications. and spending our life in front of a computer instead of in meeting rooms for most of us. But also we've seen businesses quickly respond, excuse me, quickly respond. I have an example of Target up here. There was a point just right after we moved to the work from home, stay at home orders. And because of some work I was doing on some video, we were building a computer for that, and I couldn't order one from Dell, frankly, because there were just delays. There were more important things like masks and PPE and things like that being shipped. Interestingly enough, I was able to build a computer just shopping online, and with curbside delivery. This is before most businesses were doing it with Best Buy. Now, I'm not doing an advertisement with Best Buy, but just to point out, they very quickly modified not just their business process, but their online app, their email response and interaction with you as a customer when you drive up and you click on the link and show your QR code to pick up your product. Now, we've all probably experienced the entire move to take home, pick up, and delivery for food. Those are just a few examples. There have been some other really fascinating things happening on a macro basis that you don't typically see. For example, Rolls-Royce formed a consortium of companies in the manufacturing, in the aerospace manufacturing industry to share data that's been anonymized and desensitized. But that data to share it across regions, globally and across regions, to be able to understand what the economic impact and recovery of different economies are. If you're a global company, the US may recover in one pattern, but you may have business in half a dozen or more different countries across the globe, and those more than likely are going to have much different return rates of how quickly they respond. If we have a reoccurrence of shutdown or stay at home, who knows what's going to happen, but we know it probably won't happen evenly across those economies. So if we talk about disruption in our industry, this is certainly a disruption on a scale none of us have seen, and isn't really in any of our control either. It's not like a competitor entered one of our markets and is being extremely disruptive to our business and being in challenging our competitiveness. It's disrupted everyone, which means we'll probably see some pretty big changes coming out of all of this as well. So I think some of the things, I use this model of disruption, innovation, acceleration. That tends to be the pattern of something occurs, someone enters the market and it offers a new kinds of service, a new way, whatever it might be. Innovation occurs to respond to that or to accelerate and or to accelerate through it. So contactless services, cyber threats, of course, we have lots of new things on the horizon or that are already happening now because of COVID-related cyber attacks. Even texting is a huge method now that we've seen. Getting notices from attackers that are sending COVID-like or contact such and so because you may have a health issue, or you need to talk to your doctor and it's someone attacking, trying to get personal information, et cetera. Of course, in economic challenging times, when there's disruption to businesses, supply chains can also be one of the biggest things to rebuild. And frankly, not just rebuild the way they were, probably establish some new form of how they're built. When we went through the 2008 economic crisis from the housing crisis, one of the challenges that came up both with that and the 2001 9/11 situation is major companies like Cisco really rethought how their supply chain would work. And rather than being dependent upon a few manufacturers for specific things, they recrafted their supply chain strategies so that they could go to a number of manufacturers and any one of those could manufacture different products, giving them much more flexibility and resiliency. So those are kind of innovations and acceleration through a rebound or through moving through a economic downturn that I expect we'll continue to see, and some innovations we don't expect. Nobody could have predicted. I think what's challenging also in this situation, given that it's a health-driven health crisis, and we're dealing with personal safety here, that changes behaviors too, especially of our employees, our customers, all of us really. And we may have rolling cycles of some outbreaks, maybe on a small, maybe on a larger basis. Of course, we have all the social measures that we do around reducing contact, People being concerned to return to businesses like theaters and restaurants, or maybe not. Maybe those things will shift to help people feel more comfortable. And again, local and global dynamics of how all this occurs. There's just you could pick any number of examples of changes we've already seen, whether it's the state of California university system changing to all virtual in the fall. Not all folks have done that. Notre Dame has a different strategy. We've certainly, the airlines are a big topic. How does that return? What changes they're having to make? And we're already seeing AI algorithms changing so that they open up middle seats and also distribute passengers on planes. We've talked about curbside delivery, large venues where there's in places where there's congregation of large groups of people bring particular challenges. And I know our sports franchises and organizations are all trying to figure out how they can return into some form of delivering their products and services to the market. Of course, we're also worried now, even more so than not just a clean restaurant, but what is this organization or this company doing to sanitize the environment so that we are not at risk at contracting the COVID virus. So a new phrase a lot of us have used is new normal. What's the new normal going to be? Are we going to return to what it was? Probably not. There's going to be some form of a new normal. I tend to think of it, and one of the analysts at Accelerated Strategies Group shared with me was this idea of next normal. It's probably a series of reestablishing what that next normal looks like. We gain some familiarity, then we're going to have some change. So let's almost be prepared, just like there may be rolling recoveries or outbreaks, we may also have kind of a rolling next normal type process. So how does this all apply to our industry in IT? It's interesting, during a downturn, we're seeing the number of job openings for software developers are on the increase. They're looking for technology people. Why? Because companies have moved to a digital strategy. They're in the process of going through this digital transformation. Maybe they're early, maybe they're very well down the path. And frankly, the more investment that's been made in digital transformation, the ability to create software, create digital experiences, the ability to leverage data that is created through all kinds of means, interactions with customers, operations, and how that occurs, supply chains, all kinds of things. That may be a very substantial competitive advantage for organizations that can take advantage of that, of course. Now, we do have cutbacks, we do have cost structure changes, and that's certainly something that can affect a lot of people, even to their employment from that standpoint. But we'll also see changes in business models. It was an example of a firm that was in the food delivery service to wholesalers and shifted from a B2B to a B2C because of the situation with downturn in business and businesses shutting down. It may be a permanent change for them. So we'll see some pretty big changes, as well as some fine tuning to what we're doing. Now, I think, of course, this is an opportunity to innovate. Anytime we have disruption, we kind of throw up the assumptions, throw them up on the board, erase them. What are the new assumptions? What has changed? How does that affect customer behavior, our business opportunity, how we may operate, our competitors, our marketplace, et cetera? All of that is right platform for us to innovate. Now, our topic today was about, of course, about mainframes and DevOps and the digital recovery. We'll host some more about this, and we're not just talking about mainframes, but it's interesting that I started my career in the mainframe environment some number of years ago. You can probably tell from my gray hair, but that's still prevalent today. It's still a major factor in how businesses operate, especially businesses in the Fortune 1000 that have been around a while, built through a time of mainframe technology, went through client server, moved into the cloud, etc. And I mentioned things like the data that's contained in those systems. Huge, vast amounts of data are not only processed, but maintained on mainframe systems. And we've gotten into a world where those are no longer standalone mainframe systems and applications, but really need to and are being integrated into a larger economy of applications, of systems, cloud, public and private, integration through APIs and other services that we use to interoperate between applications. So Mainframe technology is kind of standalone, leaving it back in the corner, if you will, being systems that may be older, less happening with them. Frankly, more and more is being done with those applications because they're vital to financial services, to healthcare, to manufacturing, to a number of industries. And if you've started your business in the last 10 or 20 years, maybe you don't have mainframes, but I'll bet there's suppliers in your supply chain, manufacturers that are highly dependent upon those technologies and is an important part of their strategy. So the message here is, don't set aside, let's think about and let's move how we interact, how we create software, how that software is integrated and leveraged with other systems and applications that are all part of our overall technology strategy, the part of our digital transformation and how we deliver services to our customers. So with that, I'm going to switch over slides here, if you pardon me just for a moment, and turn things over to Jeff. So let me share this other slide presentation. Jeff, are you ready to take things?
I am, Mitch. Thank you very much. And thank you for setting the stage. We're all experiencing things that I don't believe anyone has ever experienced in the modern age around the pandemic. Certainly everything that we're engaging with has to take that into account. And we're delighted to have this opportunity to speak to your audience, Mitch, knowing that they are a DevOps-centric, DevOps-familiar, DevOps-educated audience. We do have a lot of conversations around the world with our hundreds of customers, some of whom are well along on their DevOps journeys and some who are just starting. And we'll talk to a couple of things briefly in this session about where we at ASG are working with our customers to enhance their DevOps results. I will encourage anyone, as we're talking through here, we do invite questions in the questions pane or in the chat pane. Feel free to ping something out. While I'm speaking, Anna and Mitch will be monitoring that, and we'll trade hats as I turn this over to Anna a little bit later in in the discussion. So on screen, you see something that may be somewhat familiar to you. This is a typical DevOps architecture, and full transparency. This reflects at least the point in time of a few months ago, what we had adopted for DevOps here within ASG. You see a lot of the familiar players. We see Git, we see Jenkins, we see all the sorts of tools that are typical. And this is a typical sort of arrangement, configuration of the tools required to have an effective DevOps workflow. And what we find working with our customers is that coordinating all the tools in the tool chain is a place where they've got some particular challenges. And we do have a particular way that we think we can help them with that. If we could go to the next slide, please, Mitch. It starts with the idea of value stream. And if you've not run across value stream, it's sort of self-defining. It is that sequence of things that need to occur from the time that something is asked for to the time something is delivered. It is the stream of activity that delivers value to your customers. It's a concept that came to us from the lean manufacturing movement, got adopted very quickly. You see it used in the jargon for the scaled agile framework, and that particular framework for agile. And Mitch, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback hearing myself. Maybe if you could go on mute, Mitch, that would help.
You bet. Apologies
Thank
for that.
you. That's quite all right. If it's distracting me, I was afraid it might be distracting others. And at the end of the day, so technology has adopted the same sort of idea that if we marshal our resources in our development sequence so that we're approaching the technology enablement of the business in the same way that our business leaders who fund our IT activities are managing the business, we're going to get much closer alignment. If we are managing the technology as an end-to-end value stream, then we get the same sorts of postures within what we do as the line of business leaders. And so as a consequence then, if we can go to the next slide. Please, Mitch. There we go. We have to take into account what our starting place is. That last illustration obviously was something simplified to help us make a point, and the illustration you see here may be a little bit magnified to illustrate the point that almost every situation we walk into, we walk into with some legacy, with some ways of doing business that have been in place in the enterprise for some period of time. And while the value streams may be very cleanly envisioned by the line of business leaders, whether it is the delivery of a shop floor order and the sequence of manufacturing, if it is a order fulfillment to provide the logistics to deliver goods to a customer, whatever it may be, when we get into the actual details of implementation, we find the sort of organic aggregation of both technology and then the informal processes that surround it to actually make that process operate. The sneaker net, the emails back and forth, the tribal knowledge that may be represented in scripting that has been written by someone at a point in time, but then not ever fully documented, certainly not code documented, and gosh forbid when that person moves on to their next opportunity or their next point in life, the script lives on, but is both hidden and is not necessarily well understood about why it's there or what it's doing. And so as we think about DevOps and the management of the DevOps flow here at ASG, working with our customers, one of the things that came forward is the need to be able to coordinate the DevOps activity across all of the technology silos that are needed so things like those scripts become both captured and warehoused and appropriately available for examination when they're needed. The reliance on informal email exchanges or the sneaker net transfer of information from one technology to a silo declines. If we could have the next slide, please, Mitch. And that led to the offering of ASG Enterprise Orchestrator. Those of you who may know ASG or by its predecessor company name, Allen Systems Group, you know we have a deep history in workload automation. We're a premier provider for those needs to enterprises around the world. We built on that then to provide the capabilities to coordinate the activity of development of any sort of technology aligned with the value stream across all of the different silos that value stream may touch. Certainly, we have a history with mainframe applications, as you've heard Mitch mention about the importance of mainframe, but we have equal competencies across all the other technology silos you may be working with, whether that is traditional two-tier client server, multi-tier client server, cloud offerings, whether that's public, private, or hybrid. And as a consequence, the capabilities we have developed over many years for workload management can also apply to the application release automation you need to do with your DevOps tools, and has that additional value of being able to include and embrace the mainframe activity that's necessary to provide the capabilities those value streams require. This is an area that we can talk to and talk exhaustively. We could consume the entire webinar that we've got before us with just this, but I do encourage you, please submit questions if you have anything you'd like to expand on around this, or talk to us afterwards. We're happy to do that and to go into more detail. I do want to talk a bit, though, about the importance of what we're considering here in the context of the pandemic. Every organization is needing to take a different assessment of their tolerance for risk. Some of you may hear us talk about Mainframe and say, you know, gosh, that is such legacy technology. It's been around for so long. Any enterprise in the world must be thinking about moving their workloads completely off Mainframe and onto other platforms, cloud platforms, even in-house multi-tier client server. And certainly many were, and just as many were still finding that they had so much value presented to them in the Mainframe, they weren't looking to move off, but they were looking to move it into their overall value stream automation strategies. Now, with the advent of the pandemic, as customers are looking at, enterprises are looking at their toleration for risk, many are beginning to reconsider any initiatives they had to move off Mainframe because that introduces so much risk into the environment. It is a big bang, high risk sort of exercise to shut down a transaction processing system on the Mainframe that's been doing the work that's been needed for decades and doing it well, to move to something completely brand new. So we do find our customers are approaching us and saying, we do want to be able to take the value that we're getting from DevOps. We want to be able to include our Mainframe offerings in those DevOps capabilities. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. Mitch? If we could go to the next slide, please. Mitch? There we go.
It's just
they're wanting to be able
day for my Mac and go to webinar.
Right. We did have a question pop up, Jeff. It's a very interesting one. I don't know if you want to take it now or after you talk about it.
Well, let me complete the thought, and then I'm going to grab that question. Okay. So what we're talking to you about today, as DevOps professionals, is that you should be considering marshaling your DevOps development activity around the value streams that align with what your business leaders are doing, and you should be including Mainframe in those considerations. So Anna, what is the question? It'll probably take me a moment to scroll and find the right place to
I'll
see.
ask it for Adi. They say, hi, Jeff, I've been involved in helping enterprises in Europe with the adoption of DevOps practices on the mainframes over the last 5 years, and it has been a struggle to convince leadership on the value and need for modern engineering practices on the mainframe as part of their technical stack. Do you think we have reached a tipping point in terms of adoption of DevOps practices on the mainframe?
You know, I'll start on that, and then it'll actually bridge nicely into the conversation Anna's here to provide. I do think that we are seeing an inflection in the curve around that. We've got customers who are approaching us that are large-scale enterprises who have made investments in DevOps and have come to the realization that they've got to include their mainframe operations. At the end of the day, there are very few enterprises, and certainly very few large-scale enterprises, that don't have a heterogeneous technology environment. And many of them continue to have strong reliance on mainframe for mission-essential operations, whether it's transaction processing around payments, it is the orchestration and delivery of their ERP capabilities. Mainframe remains part of what they do, and excluding mainframe is really minimizing the value that they can get from their DevOps investments overall. But at that point, I'm actually going to turn it over to Anna, and Anna's going to lead to a conversation about where we do see enterprises who are reaching out and saying, we need to have mainframe included in what we do. Anna, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Mitch, if you'll go to the next slide. Right, so, you know, you talk about slower adoption and why is mainframe slow to the party, right? There's some significant challenges in the mainframe world, not the least of which is that changing workforce, right? We've got older skilled workers retiring. right? And I'm in the middle generation there. So we had a bunch of baby boomers that got skilled up on the mainframe. And then there was the next generation, which I fall into, that was told, oh, the mainframe's dying. So we pretty much ignored the mainframe for a while, I must admit. And then the next generation came along and we realized, wait a minute, the mainframe's not going anywhere, but we have a gap in skill, right? And so we have brand new generation coming on. There's a lot of energy around education for these new workers, but there's still that gap in the workforce, right? And so there's got to be mentorship and bringing those people together so that we get a stronger skilled workforce there again. The next thing is that DevOps is becoming a standard practice. And as companies go down that road, they realize how critical their mainframe is, and they need to bring DevOps in mainframe together. And their end users are expecting more agile responses, right? And if they don't become more agile, then they can't respond to the end users and they fall behind in business. And so DevOps helps enable that agility, right? There's a whole bunch of things that come together to make DevOps happen. But it is driving organizations to focus on the tools that they use to manage mainframe operations, looking now for modern approaches with centralized user interfaces to attract that new generation of developer. And these new approaches include APIs for integration within the overall environment, and those APIs are on the mainframe just as much as they're anywhere else. Okay, Mitch, the next slide, please. So let's talk about JCL. That's really a very important piece of the mainframe, right? If you have an IBM mainframe, you are running JCL. It is the language that runs the mainframe, right? So it's not so much a language as a scripting tool, but we're not going to get into that very much. But there's companies, so you've got JCL, you're running multiple logical partitions, right, LPARs, and it runs on every LPAR, on every mainframe. Then there's more complexity there, right? So there's development areas, there's testing, there's user acceptance testing and production. And then that all has to happen in parallel. And we want DevOps, right? We want it all connected and running all the time, right? And continuous integration, continuous delivery. It's really complicated. So the other part that adds in, people have tried to control it with schedulers, and I've found that many companies are automating JCL with multiple scheduling engines. So then you have more complexity on top of that, right? And we still have traditional developers using that 3270 green screen. They're not really interested in moving to DevOps as much because they're really skilled with that keyboard and the keyboard shortcuts. So, this is the environment that we're looking at. Mitch, let's go to the next slide, get a little better picture of all the moving parts. I talked about all the different environments. If you look at this diagram, it's a little complicated, but you start at the top right-hand side, you're in production, right? And that's where we know we have good, strong running JCL. And then when you're ready to make a change, we have to update, and you move across to the left, across the top, and you export it out of the lifecycle manager, and then you have to transform it to work in that development environment. And there's reformatting and validation to make sure now it's going to work in development. And then we say, okay, ready to test. So now we've got to move it into the test environment and transform it again, because there's variables and things that different files that you have to access and things when you move across LPARs or different systems. And you just repeat the process again into user acceptance testing. And then finally, you can promote it back into production. And so this is the process that if you have, those developers, the skilled ones, and the new guys who are coming in and learning, doing all these changes manually, well, there's a lot of room for error, really, right? We're human after all. So, Mitch, the next slide, please. So I want to talk to you a little bit about our approach to JCL management in the DevOps toolchain. And it really begins with our integration with Eclipse. Over the past year, our field engineers have been asking our customers if they have DevOps initiatives. And a lot of them are saying yes. And one of us told them, we said, are you running Topaz or IBM IDZ? And they said, hey, actually, we're running both. The only one that didn't tell us that was intrigued by the idea of just a plain standard Eclipse plugin, because they want those younger generation of developers to be empowered to work in an environment that they're comfortable in. So a newer generation of developers uses Eclipse for Java development and all kinds of different other development activities. And so we built our plugin to run on standard Eclipse. It also integrates with CompuWare Topaz, and within the next 3 months, it's going to integrate with IBM IDZ. And the next stage there you're looking at in the center, our ASG Pro JCL is installed on the mainframe, and it's a very powerful JCL management solution. And with it comes a RESTful web service. And we talk to that RESTful web service from the Eclipse plugin so that there's a standardized interface. And that leads to that next benefit. And it connects then with your CI/CD solutions or your continuous integration, continuous delivery. And Jeff mentioned ASG Enterprise Orchestrator. It's one of those tools that you can integrate with, but we use Jenkins also. There's other solutions, right, that you can use. And the beautiful thing about RESTful web services, as you guys probably know, because you've used them with other products, is that they're standardized, right? And we can connect and execute the same thing. And so as we improve our solution, improve the things we want to do from our Eclipse interface, you also have connectivity into the very same functionality from your CI/CD solution. And Mitch, I think we have a quick poll question we can put out there. I'm interested in this crowd. How many of you guys are running these kind of solutions? IBM IDZ, Topaz, or both? Oh, that's the other poll question. We can go back, I guess.
My bad.
Well, why don't
That's okay.
we
Let's ask it.
Anna, why don't we go ahead and capture this question here,
Yeah, let's
if
do
we
it.
could? So we do want to ask a little bit of insight from you in the audience. We're very happy that you folks have shared time with us. One of the things we'd like to know as we're talking to you is how well or to what degree Mainframe is being considered within your enterprise DevOps practice. You have 5 answers there, and is the poll active now, Mitch?
Yes, it is. Yep. And we're getting responses. Okay. Yeah, about a quarter of our audience, a little more, have responded. We'd love to get half of the folks jump in. Easy thing to answer. Just select one of them and press submit. And we still got them coming in.
Good. So we do want to know, of the folks who have joined us here today, how many of you do have a mainframe in your enterprise technology mix? And if you do have mainframe, where it is in terms of the DevOps adoption. It may be that you're fully integrated, and we do know that there are some shops out there that have been very early adopters of DevOps, both as a discipline itself and then by extension DevOps with mainframe. But there are others that are still very early in the curve. So Mitch, how are we doing in terms of our response rates?
Doing real well. We're almost half the folks have responded. That's usually a good cutoff point. How about if I close the poll and we'll look at the results?
Let's do.
There we go.
And actually, this distribution looks very common. This looks very common. There are still hundreds and actually thousands of enterprises out there that use mainframe, but we understand that not all do, and many maybe have started in the last few years or don't have particular business models that require it. But of those that we do, this looks like a very common distribution where there's a few that have not started to include mainframe in their DevOps, and then there are a few those leading edge early adopters who have got it fully integrated in their DevOps practice. Thank you. We appreciate that response. Anna, were you going to bring forward your polling question now?
Yes, so Mitch, that was the question about Eclipse interfaces that these customers might be running. And, whether you're mainframe or not, it's actually very interested to see whether you're using Eclipse. Are you using IDZ if you're a mainframe shop? CompuWare Topaz, this is multiple choice. And you may not know, and that's okay too. So that's why we give you an I don't know answer.
Great, we're getting some votes in. It's an interesting question, you know, while we're taking this poll on, I'm curious if you've seen this. We seem to be making a shift, generally speaking, not just speaking of the mainframe environment, where we give developers a lot more flexibility in the choice of the tools that they use,
Mhm.
sometimes even the software stack that's used, whether they add open source or different integration tools for CI/CD, whatever it might be. And I'm curious, is that something that you see occurring more frequently in the mainframe development teams that you interface with?
You know, Jeff may have a little more experience in that area, but I would say what I'm seeing more of is standardization, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
wide use of the 3270 green screen, of course, because that's just been there for so long. But this growing need to provide a more standardized interface off of the mainframe. But the standards on the mainframe are so consistent, right? It's been there and successful for so long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are used to working with it a certain way. And so finding, you know, other tools, there's a lot of mainframe software providers and there's different solutions, but, you know, mainframe software is pretty expensive. And, you know, so they tend to, as a company, choose solutions and get everybody trained up on them.
Makes a
Yeah,
lot
a
of
Jeff,
sense.
couple of
what is
things.
your
Yeah.
perspective on that?
Yeah. A couple of things that we've heard from the folks we work with is while they do want to give the developers enough range and latitude that they can be effective and efficient, they do want to focus on the efficiency. And that's one of the reasons why there is a focus on getting capabilities into an integrated development environment and getting into a common work method. If the IDE allows the user to switch seamlessly between working with the job control language they need to initiate work on the mainframe for the aspect of a value stream that requires mainframe, and from that same user experience then move on to working with the Java code that they may deploy on the mainframe, which supports a JVM just like any other server, or on a Unix server, or on a Windows server, that they actually get tremendous upside from allowing that user to remain in context, that developer to remain in context. There's a lot of research that has been shared with us by our customers around the cost of switching, attention switching. If we can keep the developer in that good state of concentration, they get much more productive for a longer period of time than if they have to step away from the IDE where they're doing their distributed systems work and go to a mainframe classical interface to do their mainframe work. So what do we see here from the polling results?
Yeah, it looks like 33% are saying Eclipse, a third of the audience. That's a good indication of some, concentration of use. Anna, what are your thoughts on looking at the distribution here?
No, it's really interesting, and I'm not surprised that half the audience doesn't know. That's not what everybody knows. This is more the developer level, you know, and if you're managing developers and know what they're using to be productive, so that's not surprising to me either. But the distribution between Topaz and IDZ is interesting too, and a stronger use of IDZ, and not surprising. But we are seeing that there's different companies. I'd be interested to see how many of those were double answer. We'll have to come back to them later to see who are using both, because I'm
Mhm.
seeing that happen a lot too. So interesting answer. It's good.
We don't get quite that flexibility to look at those great kind of questions. If we're looking at Excel, we could do that.
Right. All right, so you can go to the next slide and we'll talk about a customer story that we have. And I can't use their name, of course, but it is a major credit card processor, and their story really is that they had chosen to standardize on CompuWare Topaz. And the company made a major investment in CompuWare solutions, and they're trying to get all of their developers to adopt the Topaz environment. And one of the first things their developers asked them when they started using Topaz was, okay, how do I scan my JCL? And because they've been actually using one of our other JCL management solutions for a long time, and that's their unit testing software, really is what it comes down to. Is, they make their changes to the JCL and they run a quick scan to make sure it's standardized and everything's going to work and it's going to resolve variables with a scheduler, and there's a lot of moving parts. And when the answer was no, you got to go back to your 3270 green screen for that, they said, I don't need to use Topaz. I'll go back to the 3270. I like it just fine, right? And so, they came to us and said, it's time. We need an Eclipse plugin, and we need something compatible with Topaz. And we took that challenge and brought it to life. And now they're engaging with it and adopting Topaz, and that's what they want to see in their environment. And that helps their experienced developers talk with their younger developers and communicate at the same level, and really start to transfer knowledge, right? And I love this quote from them. It says, our developers love the remote scanning feature that ProJCL provides. This is actually something that doesn't have much to do with the Eclipse plugin we're talking about, although you can do remote scanning from the Eclipse plugin. But it opens doors to maximize their mainframe DevOps tooling by allowing developers to validate their JCL from within one interface. So for them, it was about centralizing the use and standardizing in one place and keeping people from context switching, as Jeff just mentioned. And so they're happy, and of course we're happy too that they're happy. And so it's a great story. And we have other customers who are looking to convert off of older JCL management solutions to a more modern solution like ProJCL because they want that DevOps interface. And one of the next steps that this customer is going to take is integrating with Jenkins so that they can have their CI/CD solutions and their pipeline move everything over and get the scanning built right in with it. So it's really interesting taking this journey together with them.
And that just sort of leads back to a couple of threads we introduced earlier when I believe you said it was Avi from Europe asked the question about how to promote the case for including Mainframe in the DevOps practices. This is one of the things that I think you can point to, is to point to the best practice that's being adopted by significant enterprises around the world. Certainly you can come to our website. This case study would be available. We have others available there. Certainly you can also point them toward the blogs that we publish on this topic area. And we are publishing frequently here as we share our experiences with our customers in both their use of the ProJCL DevOps enablement through Eclipse. And we talk to the other aspect that I bring forward, which is the need for a mainframe inclusive application release automation capability in the coordination of the tool chain. The idea that JCL is placed into Jenkins for source code management is an example of where our Enterprise Orchestrator has the capabilities to bridge that gap between the mainframe and the non-mainframe parts of the world. So with that, Mitch, I don't know, do we have some other questions that have come in that we want to turn our attention to?
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. Some great questions here. One of the questions that comes from Jim, he's asking about, the disciplines from the mainframe environment, the protection, change, I think he's talking about change control, migration, deployment, et cetera, that have never been developed in distributed computing. I think we could say that has, but maybe a little bit differently. What have you seen in DevOps distributed to bridge this gap? Maybe I'll start this out with just teeing up the conversation. I think there's a bit of a doing the same thing with a different approach. A lot of it's driven by if you're creating software through agile means where you're doing things in much smaller chunks, you're starting to migrate smaller pieces of change into production. The need for something like a change control board, which would be very typical in a mainframe environment, is less so because you're interactively working with the product team, with the development team, and you're using other tools to do migration and deployment. So I think it's not that it isn't done. Maybe some of the same good things are being done. Maybe they just didn't learn the lessons from the mainframe environment to get shared in that. I don't know, what are your thoughts? Do either of you think that's true, or you have a different perspective about it?
Well, I think it's an extension of what you say. Certainly I can share a certain amount of the experience that Jim may be reflecting in the question, in that there's been a tradition that we do our source code management in and only in the platform of development. So, my experience may reflect Jim's, where CA Endeavor or ASG Lifecycle Manager was what we use to manage our mainframe source code. And that's effective and it's good. Where we are seeing changes and changes in a slightly different direction is to ensure that as the source code for a particular technology silo is being archived, it's being archived in context of all of the other source code for all of the other technology that's required for the end-to-end value stream. I wish I could, off the top of my head, remember which author or poet is credited with "No man is an island." Well, it's certainly come to the point where no technology is an island.
Right.
And so we do see more and more desire to ensure that the source code for mainframe is being stored in a way that it can be recovered and can be kept in context with all of the other application versions or technology that's required for the end-to-end process, and not just the technology silo vertical process on the mainframe.
Right, and I think, just add that solutions like ASG Enterprise Orchestrator, that's its purpose and existence really is to help bridge those gaps and bring them together. And because it can automate stuff on the mainframe, and maybe it's going to bring that code over to your Git location, right? It's going to automate all of those things. And so the RESTful web services, it's just like from the JCL perspective, if we commit JCL into Git, then we need to scan it, but we need to scan it from Jenkins or from AEO, or it's all moving parts, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's the advancement of all the technologies, right? We have a part to play, and other vendors have other parts to play, but we have to elevate it so that we can all talk together, right? And some of that is that RESTful web service, and there's other ways to all work together. But AEO is a great well, we call it ASG Enterprise Orchestrator because that's what it does. It orchestrates across all of those silos, and helps to simplify the very complex, as Jeff's slide showed how complex it can be.
And as I take off my mainframe hat, where I'm looking to identify with Jim and his context, and perhaps put on my DevOps hat to identify with Avi and some of his context, we do invite you, come to the website. There are a number of different webinars and a number of different resources that expands on things that I have to believe that you DevOps professionals are wondering about, such as how does Enterprise Orchestrator manipulate containers? How does it integrate with fill in the blank with your favorite DevOps tool and the tool chain and so forth? A lot more information there, and we'd certainly be happy to share that with you, or to talk with you about the particular things you're trying to accomplish in your enterprise.
Excellent. One of the folks also asked about Zoe, the Open Mainframe project, open source project. Any thoughts on that and how that fits into this kind of ecosystem of tools?
It's a genuinely interesting question. We are certainly looking to join the Zoe Open Mainframe movement. If you're not familiar with it, it's something that I believe is endorsed, if not sponsored, by IBM, that looks to make sure that the capabilities of the mainframe are exposed through APIs that can integrate more gracefully with the distributed and cloud offerings. We're looking through the steps necessary now to make the capabilities that Anna and her team have delivered for ProJCL to the Eclipse plugin via API integration available to Zoe. They do have some standards that we need to apply before we would qualify, but I think you'll see us out there very soon. And it goes back to some of the themes that we opened this conversation with. The mainframe continues to be critical, and actually now, during the time of pandemic, it is probably going to persist longer within enterprises than that might have prior to the pandemic, simply because enterprises don't want to take on that additional risk of migration. And as a consequence, the idea of ensuring that it is a fully participating member in the larger enterprise integration scheme is critical to success. We're investing in that. You're going to find the other vendors in this space are investing in it, and clearly IBM's investing in it. And we actually go out on a limb and believe that you'll see a renewed vitality around mainframe processing because of the fact that it is both the most reliable and most available platform on which you can deliver any technology, and I'll defend that. And you're seeing IBM and we in the software community doing things to make it both economically and commercially more attractive than perhaps it was in prior periods.
Excellent. Next one would be a good question for you, Anna. JCL system exits can be coded to enforce JCL standards. Can that be cross-pollinated to the distributed environment? Your thoughts on that?
I've been reading and rereading that question, wondering if Jim might expand on that question. What does he mean by cross-pollination? I mean, that's Jim, if you could give us a little bit more of what you're talking about, I'm very interested to hear what you mean by that.
Yeah, I was wondering, is that about distributed work teams, distributed applications? What Jim might be referring to?
I think he's raising his hand.
Good question.
I don't know.
While we're getting some feedback from Jim, kind of a rather long question here, but as I discovered several years ago while working on a project on one of the largest automobile and logistic group in the UK, that Java EE Enterprise Edition remote method invocation works fine on the mainframe if installed correctly to offer agile DevOps objectives. As this was not part of our original standard Eclipse implementation, and we'll appreciate your views on this. I don't know if you've heard of that being done before, either of you, or any thoughts on that?
You know, that's a question that demands I think a more extensive answer than we've got time left. What we'll do is we'll commit to record these questions and we'll follow up to the community with responses. You know, the thing that I'll say is I've worked in and around mainframe long enough that I remember the times before it had any sort of a virtual machine available, and now with the most recent releases of the IBM operating system last September, and with the capabilities that are available with the newest hardware, the Z15s, you do find that that IBM does deliver a fully Java compliant environment. And you know, it comes back to the same phrase that I heard in that question on mainframe as it does on distributed or cloud: an appropriately configured Java environment. Java being Java, it gives a lot of flexibility, and the ways to misconfigure it are at least as numerous as the ways to configure it properly.
Mm-hmm. Lots of opportunity there either way.
Yeah.
Great.
With that, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say I need to break away. I've got another call here at the top of the hour, Mitch.
Yep. So we just want to wrap up. Thank you, both of you, Anna and Jeff, for your excellent presentations, discussions, questions.
Namaste.
We also want to let folks know that our two Amazon winners, Amazon gift cards, are Joe G and Vanessa H. So thank you on behalf of the entire team here.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations to them. And thank you to you folks at the ASG Technologies for this engaging conversation. And thanks, of course, to our audience. Your time's super valuable, and that you spent an hour of it with us we appreciate that. We're honored that you did that. So be safe, be well, have a good day.
Yes,
Cheers,
thank you. Bye-bye.